Folks, and today's topic is power meters for running. And this is a power meter. This happens to be a Stryd power meter, S-T-R-Y-D. I think it's far and away the most popular of the power meters. Garmin has one. I frankly haven't heard much about the Garmin one lately. And there's another competitor, I can't remember the name, but Stryd is really the king of power meters. So, have my sheet all made. We're going to talk just very briefly about power meters because you could probably spend hours talking about these. So first of all, I mentioned run. And that's run versus bike. So power meters first started with bikes. And I'm here to tell you, if you are a serious cyclist, you almost certainly have a power meter. The big difference between a running power meter and a biking power meter is that biking power meters are real. By that I mean that meter is typically on the crank of the bike, and it is truly measuring your power, your force, what you're putting out. The ones for running are, I'm going to call them hypothetical power, if you will. Essentially what happens is you're going to load your height and your weight into this. There is a ton of circuitry in here that knows whether or not you're going uphill, downhill, how long your foot is on the ground. It's measuring all kinds of things, and from that, Stryd has some very complex algorithms that really says, here's the energy expenditure that you are expending every time you're running at various different efforts. And they're calling it power, but it's a little bit of a misnomer, but for sake of example, we're just going to continue to call it power. So why might you consider a power meter? Well, they're very objective. That's similar to a heart rate monitor. I mean, power meters, it's not about how you feel, it's not about pace, it's going to give you very objective data. It is instant. So one of the issues with heart rate monitor training is heart rate is a lagging indicator. So let's take the example of going up a hill. Heart rate is not going to catch up until you kind of get well up the hill, or an interval training till you get well along with the intervals. The power meters are pretty much instant. As soon as you start going uphill, as soon as you start going faster or slower, it's going to register that right away. There's no lag in that at all. And then power meters are great if you're running in areas with a lot of elevation. One thing people are very challenged with is, let's say you're supposed to go out for a 6-mile run at a 9-minute pace, and you're making that up. If you're in a hilly area, so how do you maintain that 9-minute effort? Because if you're going up a steep hill, you probably don't want to be at 9. You don't want to be at 9. Likewise, you don't want to be at 9 when you're going down a steep downhill. So power helps level that out. It's really great when there's elevation involved because you're going to go with a power range, not a pace, and it's pretty quickly going to tell you what that is. So in order to make a power meter, useful for you, you either need to know your critical power or your functional threshold power. They're two different terms, CP and FTP. They're actually slightly different. For the sake of example, we're going to say that they're the same thing, and we're going to say that they're very similar to what your pace at lactate threshold would be. They're not quite that either, but they're a measurement point sort of in there, and all of your zones are based off of that because you have to set up some training zones. So then what do you do once you have these training zones? Then you start training by power rather than training by pace or by effort. So what that might look like is maybe you're now going to do 7 miles at 240 to 250 for your power. So rather than glancing at your watch to see what your pace is like or going with what your effort is like, you're just trying to keep your power in that 240 to 250 range. And as I said, power is very instant. So if you have a change in your elevation, it's going to show up right away. Or maybe you're doing interval training. So you might do 6 by 3 minutes at 295 to 305 for your power. Again, because it's instant, you're going to show up that power right away. So you use your critical power or you use your functional threshold power, you create training zones, and then you begin doing all your running within various zones rather than using paces, effort, heart rate, or something like that. Now, there are some negatives, of course, to a power meter because there is no perfect system for training. One of them is that CP, FTP, whatever you call it, you have to keep that current because as your fitness changes, that number is going to change. It's been my experience that most people don't like to go through the testing. It's recommended about every 6 weeks or so to kind of see what their current CP is. Or they do it and they say, gee, I think I screwed that up. I think I ran too fast and I was fading at the end. I think I had too much juice left at the end, and now they don't have any trust in the number. And running, 80% mental, the other 20% is in your head. If you don't have confidence in whatever numbers you're using, they're not good for you. But you got to keep it current. Power does not really work well with wind, heat, etc. Most methods don't. You have to manually make some type of adjustment. So I gave the example, maybe you're running 6 miles at 240 to 250. Well, if it's 80 degrees and 90% humidity, that number is probably too high. You have to make some manual adjustment for it. Power won't do that. And another question is, how will you race? Now, there are lots of people that race using power. They figure out that for my 10K, my average power should be about X, and they try and maintain that power through the race. And if you're doing that, that's great. But a lot of other people still go back to pace, and then they're constantly looking to see how their power is lining up with their pace and getting concerned in their training that, well, is this power giving me the pace I want? So if you're not going to race with power, I don't know how valuable the power would be for you. And then the other thing that I don't know if it's a positive or a negative, it can be more of a negative, is data overload. You can go to the Stride website in a place they call Power Center, and you can get more data. It will make your head spin. So if you love data, if you're a data geek, that stuff's fantastic. But here's the danger of that, is there's so much data that it can be a distraction. And somebody will say, gee, I really think I need to work on my vertical oscillation. Well, is that really the thing that you need to be working on? Because for most people, the answer is to train more and be more consistent. It's not working on vertical oscillation. And there can be so much other data out there that it becomes a distraction. But as I said, on the other hand, if you love your data, then there's a whole lot of data out there, if I could talk at the very end. So anyway, that's a bit about power meters. Any questions? Let me know.